Hey everyone, welcome back to Bear It in Mind. On this channel we explore the world of psychology so that we can better understand ourselves and others. In the previous videos we've looked at why people conform and obey, but in this video we're going to flip that on its head and ask what psychological research tells us about how people can resist the pressures from others to conform and obey. As ever, there are timestamps in the description below if you want to jump to a particular section, but for now, let's dive in. Can you think back to any of the previous studies into conformity and obedience that we've covered in the last videos and spot resistance at work? For example, you may remember Ash's conformity study with the line length test. Can you remember what the percentage was of people who conformed? It was 33%, which means that 66% resisted. They didn't conform. And what about Milgram's study? Can you remember how many obeyed all the way up to 450 volts? It was 65% of people, which meant that 35 resisted. What was it that enabled that 35% of participants to resist? What about Hoefling's nurse study? How many nurses obeyed the orders to administer the drug? It was 21 out of 22, which meant one resisted. Wouldn't you like to meet that one nurse who didn't give in? What was it about her that enabled her to resist? Resistance to social influence is the ability to withstand or hold out against the pressure from others to conform or to obey authority. In this video, we're going to consider resistance to social influence under two headings. One, social support, which focuses on the external situational factors involved in resistance. And secondly, locus of control, which focuses on the internal, dispositional, personality aspect of resistance. Social support refers to how the presence of other people who also resist can help you do the same. They act as models to show us that resistance is possible.
Mr. Frodo's not going anywhere without me.
We're going to briefly consider three pieces of research into social support. Firstly, Ash's study. And you may remember this from the previous video. If you've not seen it before, I encourage you to click up here and have a watch. Ash found that when participants were given the simple task of matching one line's length with the length of another line from a choice of three, 33% of participants gave obviously incorrect answers but went along with the answer of others. However, when Ash varied his study and manipulated unanimity, something interesting happened. We saw that if there was the presence of just one other person in the group who did not go along with the majority, it was enough for the participants to resist the pressure and not conform.
In the previous experiment, the naive subject stood alone against the group. In this variation, Ash gave the naive subject a partner, here seated in the third position, who also gives the correct response.
1.
2.
1. 2.
Conformity rates dropped from 33% to 25%. And this was even the case if this other person who did not conform gave a wrong answer. It was simply the fact that someone else had not given the majority answer that was enough to enable the participant to follow their own conscience. The participant was no longer alone, they had social support.
Wait! We're coming too!
Let's consider secondly supporting evidence that comes from research by Allen and Levine. Did he just say Avril Lavigne?
He was a skater boy, she said see you later boy.
No, Allen and Levine. They found that conformity decreased when there was one dissenter in an Ash type study. That's somebody who didn't go along with the majority. More importantly, this occurred even if the dissenter wore thick glasses and said he had difficulty with his vision, so he was clearly in no position to judge the length of lines. Therefore, this suggests that social support enables someone to be free of the pressure from the group. Thirdly, the role of social support and resistance can also be seen back in Milgram's study. Having another person present who you see disobey reduces the pressure for you to obey. In Milgram's study, he set up a situation where there was a team of 3 people testing the learner. One of the 3 was the real participant, and the other 2 were Confederates in on the experiment. When a Confederate refused to give the electric shocks, this led to obedience rates dropping from 65% to just 10%. This disobedient person acts as a model for the participant and frees them to act how they really want. A psychologist by the name of Rotter, now you're not likely to forget that one in the exam, proposed the idea of locus of control. Locus of control refers to the amount of control we perceive to have over situations in our lives. Locus of control can be viewed on a continuum, with one end being internal locus of control and the other external locus of control. People with an internal locus of control believe that they are mostly in control and responsible for what happens to them, and that they can succeed in difficult and challenging situations. On the other hand, people with an external locus of control believe that things are mainly out of their control. They generally feel helpless in difficult and challenging situations. This can often be revealed in our successes and failures. For example, let's say you didn't do as well as you had hoped in your exam. Someone with an external locus of control would respond to their disappointing exam grade by saying things like, well, my teacher's, he's just rubbish. If I only had the other teacher, I'd have done a lot better. I had a bit of an off day that day, and when we covered that topic, I wasn't in. Or the classic, the questions I wanted, they didn't come up. Do you hear it? External locus of control puts the focus for failure not on themselves, but on other external factors. They are helpless and likely to repeat the same performance in the exam, always hoping for that one great day when everything comes together and they smash it. In contrast, someone with an internal locus of control would respond to a less than pleasing exam grade by considering how they might need to change the way they studied, or reflect on how early they started to prepare for the exam, as well as learning from how their mates who did really well prepared for the exam. Do you see it? Internal locus of control puts the focus for failure on what they did or didn't do, which is powerful because, rightly viewed, it can enable them to change and improve how they do the next time. They have control and can do something about it. Start listening carefully to what people say around you when they succeed or fail. Have a listen to your classmates when people get their test scores back. Internal or external locus of control? So, here's a question for you, and pause the video in a moment. Which one of the two, internal locus of control or external locus of control, is more likely to be able to resist the pressures to conform or obey? It's obviously internal locus of control. And this makes sense because if a person believes that they have control in difficult and challenging situations, they are more likely to take a stand against the pressures to conform and obey. They see that they are responsible for their actions and so are more likely to make their own decisions based on what they think rather than pressures from others. Now, what about the research that's been conducted into locus of control? Let's consider two studies. Firstly, research by Olliner and Olliner in 1988. In this study, they interviewed two groups of non-Jewish people who had lived through the Holocaust and Nazi Germany. They compared 406 people who had protected and rescued Jews from the Nazis, and 126 people who had not done this. Oliner and Oliner found that the group that rescued the Jews had scores demonstrating an internal locus of control. And secondly, research by Holland in 1967. In this study, they repeated Milgram's original study, but beforehand they measured whether the participants tended to have an internal or external locus of control. Then they put them through Milgram's shock generator experiment and found that more participants who were rated as having an internal locus of control resisted, 37%, compared to those who were rated as external, only 23%. Both of these studies clearly demonstrate the significant role that having an internal locus of control can have in resisting the pressure from others. Now, let's evaluate locus of control. We need to be cautious about the strength of the evidence that we've just considered, and this is because one of the ways that locus of control is measured in people is through questionnaires. Questionnaires are an example of a self-report method and suffer from a few problems, most notably that of social desirability. This means that participants may be giving answers which they think will make them look good and be more acceptable, and as a result are not giving true and accurate answers to the questionnaire. This makes it hard to know whether the answers participants provide to measures of locus of control are valid. As a result of this, it weakens the supporting evidence for the role of locus of control in resistance. So next time you feel the pressure to conform or obey, when your conscience is telling you to resist, bear in mind what we have learned about social support and locus of control. You may feel like you are the only one, but just think that perhaps if you resisted first, it might provide the way for others to follow, because they feel they're not alone. And also, begin to listen to your own thoughts and reactions when you experience success and failure, so that you can identify your tendencies towards an internal or external locus of control. And once you begin to see it in yourself, then you can start to reflect and challenge some of your thinking if it needs to shift towards internal locus of control. If you're in a situation where you feel the pressure to conform and obey but want to resist, you stand a better chance of resisting if you focus more on what you can control, rather than blaming external factors and feeling helpless. If you want to find out whether you're more of an external or internal locus of control, I've put some links in the description where you can have a look at some questionnaires to find out for yourself. I'd love to hear what you think about this topic in this video, so please comment below. What was your score on the locus of control tests? Where did you come out? And maybe you can share some examples of what you've heard people say following success and failure that points to either internal or external locus of control. I hope you found this video helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.